You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hello, and welcome back to episode number 85 of Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, sponsored, as always, by Trailtopia. We've got a kind of Canadian guy on the show today. Art Donovan, or his alter ego, CraftE, is today's guest. Bruce Matson, from one of our other podcasts, Returning to Katahdin, suggested that I should chat with Art. The two of them are class of 2018 hikers and have hiked around each other for some time. I thought it would be good to get another perspective on this incredibly cold start to the hiking year. And CraftE, or CraftE, is a laid-back guy who has his own story to tell. We spoke when he was actually on the trail, so there's a bit of background wind from time to time, though in my opinion that sometimes adds a bit of authenticity to the recordings. I think it's great that I can speak to people who are halfway up a mountain sharing their views with us all. CraftE will be on soon. This week in If I Hit It Again, we have the lovely Stacey Bucklin, or Stylez. And while there are a few things that she may have done differently, she does give us a wonderful lesson that she learned near the end of her hike. Listen out for that. Before all that, of course, we have, do you remember those times on the trail when you really needed to treat yourself? You know, those days when you fall in the mud or the rain starts running down your neck, the rocks are driving you crazy, or even when you're just fed up. You need a boost. When that happens, stop hiking. Take off your pack and treat yourself to one of Trailtopia's scrumptious desserts. Why not go for Rocky Road pudding, a rich chocolate pudding loaded with mini marshmallows and toasted slivered almonds. By the time you get that into your system, you're going to be warm, toasty and satisfied. Try Trailtopia Adventure Food, the best of home cooking away from home. So, without further ado, let's meet one of the class of 2018, Art CraftE Donovan. Okay, I'm on today with Art Donovan, or CraftE. Hi Art, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Mighty
Now
Blue.
you are one of the class of 2018, and where are you right now?
I'm at mile 752. I've been kind of skirting along the Blue Ridge Parkway all morning.
How bad is that, eh?
Yeah, really. I had to sleep beside it last night too.
So you've done 750 miles. When did you start then?
February 28th.
Wow. So you're certainly moving on. And I, as I always do, I was actually, it was Bruce Matson from our Returning to Katahdin podcast who had met you and suggested you'd be a great guy to interview. So as I always do, and my listeners already know, I too tend to do a bit of cyber stalking. And I see that on your Facebook page that you had to interrupt your hike recently to return to Gainesville for a very important ceremony. Tell us about that.
That's right. I had to leave Ferrisburg to go home and become sworn in as a U.S. citizen a week ago Thursday.
So where are you a citizen of normally or previously?
Canada.
Canada, okay.
Canada. I've been living in Florida 35 years and 37 years, and I'm probably beyond past my time to get citizenship.
Yeah. So you thought you made the commitment. Yeah, quite right too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you regard yourself now as an American or as a Canadian?
I have to both, actually. All my children and my wife are all American, so it's probably sliding more toward American than Canadian, but it's really hard to leave that heritage behind, as you well know, I'm sure.
Of course, yeah. I mean, to me, the acid test is always when the UK were to, in my case, the UK or the British were to play America in a sporting contest, and I would have to support England every time, but not Scotland, Ireland, or Wales. Yeah, I'm sure you're the same. Yeah,
I'm the same, exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Now the US ceremony, for people who've never seen this, well, firstly, isn't that an extraordinary moment when you become a US citizen?
Absolutely. There were 48 of us sitting there in that courtroom, and we go through that oath. And, my wife, my children were shocked at the wording of the oath.
Oh,
what
really?
You commit to. It's pretty brilliant. It's amazing.
Oh, yeah. It really is. And it's a great moment when you realize how difficult some people have had it to become citizens of this country. And I think all Americans, if they ever feel jaded about their own country, should attend one of these citizenships to see how important it is for people from other countries to become citizens of America. Don't you think so?
I agree 100%. There was 25 different countries represented at these 48 people.
It's
unbelievable.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yes.
Well, so how many miles had you done before you actually got off the trail to go and become a citizen?
Oh, must have been 660, something like that, whatever Petersburg is.
Oh, really? Not that long ago then?
Oh, no. Just a week, 10 days, 11 days ago.
Right. So how long were you off the trail for then?
5 days. And my daughter returned with me to do some section hike with me. It was really, really amazing.
Oh, I bet that was nice as well. Now,
yes.
And so you went home, you slept in a proper bed, and you showered regularly. How easy was it to return to the, as I call it, the feral lifestyle?
Very easy. I slipped right back into it.
Yeah.
Once I left that hostel, I was right back into it.
Isn't that amazing how I did as well. And I was surprised. I thought once I went home and had the comforts of my home and so on, because I was home for about 7 or 8 days myself through injury. And, but once I got back to the trail, I immediately got back into it. It was quite remarkable to me how accustomed you become to living on the trail. Do you find that as well?
That's right. You've got that simple routine. Simple routine of getting up, eating, packing up, walking, finding water, finding a place to lay back down and eat, sleep. Pretty simple, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And to a degree, it's a less complicated lifestyle with less choices, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You think more about where's your water coming from than anything else.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you used to do what do you do in so-called real life, or are you retired now?
I am retired. I'm a retired university professor, veterinarian. University of Florida.
All right, nice. Now, it's taken you a long time to eventually hit the trail, hasn't it? Tell me about the first time you became aware of the AT.
I grew up approximately 70 miles northeast of Mount Katahdin. We were down in Baxter State Park, Maine in 1968 when I was 13 years old. Uh-huh. We were walking on a trail. My mother and father, little brother and sister came upon this sign, the Appalachian Trail sign described it. And my mother looked at that and said, I'd like to walk that trail someday. So that was my first exposure.
Wow. Isn't that amazing?
The seed was planted 50 years ago this year. That's incredible.
And had you always harbored ambitions to follow up on what your mother wanted to do and do it yourself?
The seed was there. It was just buried a little deep. Life gets in the way. And then as I got closer to retirement, I thought, what am I going to do in retirement? And this is one of the first things that popped up.
It's a bucket list thing. It is the bucket list thing. And a bucket list is normally something that it's normally something you don't get to, isn't it? The thing you want to do, you really don't get to.
That's the tragedy of life, isn't it?
I think
you did your bucket list. This checked off the top of the list, and the next thing on the bucket list isn't mine. It'll be my wife's, because I owe her a big one for this one.
Quite right too. So were you much of a hiker before you hit the AT? Or, have you been hiking throughout your life?
No, I've been hiking here, nothing like this, nothing overnight. I've done a couple overnighters, but mostly just section hikes here and there, all over the country and all over the world, actually.
Oh, really?
So, just doing day hikes, mostly.
So did the idea of an overnight and a long distance hike, did that appeal to you, or was it just a bucket list thing that you wanted to do? So that naturally has to involve overnights.
I think it's a little bit of both. I had that vision, and then I was really excited about the overnight part.
Were you
I
really?
love the woods. I listened to other podcasts just to fill my time as I train. And one of them, I won't mention it, but it's all about retirement, but not the money part. and they had a man on there, and he says, "What I suggest do in retirement, what you'd like to do when you were 10 years old, do it in retirement." Well, I loved to be out in the woods when I was 10 years old. So it fit perfectly. It just reinforced what I thought I wanted to do.
So how did you prepare for it? Did you train for it or not?
I walked between 4 and 12 miles 3 or 4 days a week. But, in Florida, it's flat walking, correct?
Yeah.
So
yes. Yeah.
Not much challenge there. So to find a challenge, I went to the football stadium in Gainesville and walked the stairs.
Oh, really?
That's the only elevation I could find.
That's not easy elevation, going up the stairs of a football stadium. So that was pretty good practice, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah, you do the ramps, you do the stairs, and just do a lot of variety with a 20-pound pack on my back, and it helped. It still didn't prepare me for what was to come.
Now, I agree with you. So you tell me why you think it didn't prepare you. What was it about the trail that struck you almost straight away that you couldn't find at a football stadium?
I didn't go to the football stadium for 8 hours a day.
Right.
It's 8 hours of slogging up and down. The physicality of it kind of surprised me. It took a while to get used to that.
But aren't you enjoying it? Don't you enjoy the physicality now? I certainly, I know that at one point in time, I struggled every 20 yards. I was stopping, gasping for breath. But once you got your legs and got your wind, really, the physicality is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You're just pumping oxygen and just driving. It's fun. I love it. I've always been into the physical things, so this really is right up my alley.
Yeah. And have you lost much weight?
Oh, between 25 and 35 pounds. Yeah, I didn't think I was overweight when I started.
It's amazing how it drops off. It really, for us fat blokes, it really is. It is fantastic. You lose, you lose the size of a small child. It's amazing, really.
That's correct. I'm back down to my basketball playing weight when I was in college.
Wow, isn't that amazing?
Absolutely crazy. I've never been there since. Well,
and I'm sure you'll know when you go back home, if you keep losing your weight and you keep getting more and more in shape, your blood pressure will go down, your pulse will steady, it'll be nice and relaxed. It's a great, I looked terrible when I finished. I was so skinny, but I was physically incredibly healthy at the time, I must say.
Yeah. I feel super.
So you started February. You have had a real tough weather start, haven't you, with the snow and everything? How did you cope with that?
Oh, well, it was, I knew there would be some cold, but I didn't expect 7 snowstorms, a blizzard.
Wow.
But I grew up in Canada, so I'd done some winter hiking when I was in the Boy Scouts many, 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 many moons ago.
Right.
So I was a little bit prepared, but, you buy those tents. I have a tent like you do, the tarp tent, double rainbow.
All right.
It's a 3-season tent, right? Well, that's the season it doesn't cover. And it was a challenge.
Oh, dear.
But I was prepared.
I didn't have the double rainbow, and I always wish I did. I only had the single rainbow. It was a big mistake. I definitely would have gone for the double rainbow if I thought about it properly.
Yeah, a little extra space.
Yeah,
nice.
Just that little bit of space. Now, you told me that your daughter joined you for a section of the trail. What did she actually think about it?
She called it the AT sampler from Perrysburg to Daleville. It's got everything. We had the weather, all the different weather. We had the different altitude changes. She thought she was in shape. She realized now how physical it is, but she loved every second of it.
Oh, really?
Couldn't wipe the smile off her face. She just loved it. Yeah.
You might have woken another ambition in her then, mightn't you, really?
Maybe. I told her, I said, you can't tell your siblings how difficult it is because I want them to come out too.
Did she have the adequate gear for the weather, or was your weather been okay since Perrysburg?
It was just the rain, cold and rain. No, but she was prepared. We have a kit that's put together for everybody, all my family that's coming to visit me on the trail. So
all right,
we've got all the gear one pack of gear put together. So everybody will use the same gear.
That is sensible. That is really sensible.
Yeah.
And from what you've seen then, has the weather had a big impact? Because obviously there's a lot of hikers starting this year, as I'm sure there are every year these days. And has it had much of an impact upon them? Do you think the weather's knocked quite a few of them out?
I think it did. And back in the Smokies, I don't know what percent, but I think we knocked off a lot. And there's a lot of people I've never seen since before the Smokies.
Yeah,
before Fontana.
I had smoke in the Smokies. I had snow in the Smokies as well. And at those higher elevations, it can be quite fierce up there, can't it? Oh,
absolutely. It's very very, very difficult. And we got forced off too because of the weather and the timing, because we had a bunch of spring break college kids in there, and they have priority in the shelters, so we got forced out.
Oh wow!
So that combo,
yeah, that's a bit tough, yeah. So
yes,
so far, and let's face it, you've still got twice as much as you've already done to go, which is amazing, isn't it, when you think about it? So So far, what are the big takeaways for you of the trail, and what is it about the trail that you really, really love?
The main, there's two things. The absolute beauty of the natural physical beauty of this part of the United States. I can't say it surprised me, but it's just amazing. And the other is the people on the trail. The community on the Appalachian Trail is really, really interesting, fun, engaging. Yeah, just all those good things.
Interesting is a good word.
Yes, well, that too. Yeah, it's a cross section of life, out here.
And you've enjoyed shelter life as well, have you? Are you in shelters, or are you tenting? You're tenting. You said most of the time.
I tend to. If the shelters are timed right, I stay at a shelter.
Oh, really?
About over half the time I stay at a shelter. Yes.
Okay.
So I like that community and interaction, and the people you meet and the friends you've made along the trail. It's amazing.
Yeah. What the thing I found about shelter life, and it's kind of an extraordinary thing, it's something I've never seen in my life before. You pitch up there, you've never met these people, and you sit down and start preparing your food, and everybody's happy to scooch up and make sure you get in and cook your food. And you strike up conversations with complete strangers, don't you? And they get can get relatively deep straight away.
Absolutely. And you don't know what they've done, what their story, everybody's got their story, right? And they're all interesting if you just listen. These people out here are interesting people. So that's what you got to do. Listen.
Did you hear their why? Why they've got on the trail?
Oh, yeah, most of them, almost all.
Yeah.
If you ask, they'll tell you. If you don't ask, they probably won't tell you.
Yeah.
Some of it's private.
Now you've had an example of that great expression, "the trail provides." And you told me about this the other day, and I think I'd like you to share it, if you could, about one of your other daughters, how the trail provided for.
Yes, as I said, I got forced out in the Smokies at Newfound Gap because of those combinations of spring breakers and snow. And my daughter, who was 4 months pregnant at the time, was planning on coming to hike with me. And just before Newfound Gap, she found from her doctor told her she couldn't do it. So she was very, very upset. So when I got forced out, I was stuck in Gatlinburg 3 days. That's probably 2 days longer than most human beings can stand.
That's 3 days. That's 3 days longer than most human beings can stand.
Yeah. And one of my trail family was from the local, and he arranged us to get a shuttle up to Davenport Gap and just continue on. So I missed that 30-mile gap, Northern Smokies. I called my daughter and I said, "Hey, how about you and I do that after the baby's born in October?" And she was ecstatic. So that's what we're going to do.
How
yeah,
cool is that?
You couldn't have planned that. I could not have planned that or even thought of it. So it worked out just perfect.
It happens to everybody, and I almost don't know how it happens, but it really does. So what have been your favourite spots on the trail so far? Because if you're about 750 miles, you've done MacAfee's Knob already, haven't you?
Yes, I did MacAfee's Knob. That is iconic, and that was very, very, very cool. Especially to be there with my daughter. That might be the best so far, but the one thing that really surprised me was when I came around a corner just south of Hampton, Tennessee, and came into the Laurel Canyon.
Oh, right.
Remember that canyon?
Yes, I do.
Come across a footbridge, and all of a sudden, wow! It just took. I didn't expect that. That was very, 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 very nice.
It's an exciting little hike, that as well, isn't it? It really is.
Yes, it sure as heck is. So that was probably the second.
What about, everybody says MacAfee's Knob, and I love MacAfee's Knob, and I got the so-called iconic picture, but I loved even more Tinker's Cliffs a bit further on.
Me too, because it was kind of cloudy at MacAfee's Knob. By the time we got to Tinker's Cliff, it was perfectly clear. Sun was going down about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was just awesome.
Yeah, you're walking along literally on the cliff top, the cliff edge, aren't you? And it's magnificent.
Yeah. Yes, good looking west. It's just beautiful. You're right.
Have you had any injuries so far? Any niggles, or are you feeling pretty good? I mean, obviously
I'm feeling
lost the
pretty
weight.
good. I got a bum knee, but I knew that coming in. I bruised the bottom of my foot in Tennessee, and that took a couple of weeks to heal. But everything's fine. No complaints whatsoever. I'm watching my feet.
Well, the great thing about the trail, of course, is if you had complaints, it wouldn't make any difference, would it? Because there's no one to complain to, is there?
Exactly. And something else, some other part of your body is going to scream at you anyway. So
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, you're okay. Are you taking ibuprofen to keep some of the inflammation down?
I did take some ibuprofen. I probably took too much. My wife got on my butt for that, so I backed off a lot. So I'm taking turmeric, which is what is that? That's in curry, I think, and it's supposed to be an anti-inflammatory.
Wow.
Seems to be helping.
I took 4 ibuprofen a day, every day, just 2 for breakfast, 2 for lunch. I know I'm not meant to, and I apologise to any doctors out there, but it worked for me. You know, I came home without any major injuries, so happy days as far as I'm concerned.
That's right, and I listened to your doc spot on your podcast, and she was kind of shocked at that 4 a day thing. So,
well, off mic, she often told me off. I mean, she was telling me off all the time. Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah, Lynn was great. I loved having Lynn on the show, but she just couldn't get over the 4 ibuprofen a day. And I'm still glad I took her. Once I actually dropped a whole bunch of them all over the trail, and I was so worried about any animals eating them, so I was down on my knees for about 20 minutes trying to find every single last one. All of which, by the way, I ate myself eventually. So I probably had dirt, feces, pee, and everything all over them. So who knows? Yeah. It's one of those things. So
that's the feral life.
Now I'd like to return now to what you said at the very, very beginning, and your mother on the trail. Your mother wanted to hike the trail. Did she ever do it?
No, she never did it. She raised 7 children, and again, life got in the way. Never got around to it. And now, she's 91 now. Of course, she's not going to do it now, but she also is affected with Alzheimer's at this stage in her life.
So tell us about your mum then. She raised the 7 children. She's now got Alzheimer's. And I know you're doing this for the Alzheimer's cause. Does she know you're doing this, or did she know you might do this? And how does she follow you, or how does that work out?
Well, she can't really comprehend that. She's got great, long-term memory, but the short-term memory is not there. So I don't think she ever knew I had this seed planted in my brain by her so long ago. But I am out here trying to raise money for Alzheimer's, and there's a map, those long linear maps of the trail that's in her room at her nursing home, and every day my brother goes in there and plots where I am.
Oh, really?
And every day she asks, "What's that map all about?" So that's the Alzheimer's circle. So every day. It's interesting. It's a tough disease to deal with. Yeah, it affects just a lot more than the person with it. It's all the caregivers, the family, friends, everybody.
It probably hurts the person themselves less than it does everybody else, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And some of the things you think you're doing for people affected are actually contraindicated. They don't like change. They don't need to go out for a walk a lot of times. They just like to be where they are. No change is good.
The world becomes narrower, I find. My mother-in-law has it as well. Yeah, and simpler. Yeah.
Yes, it's almost like returning to a childlike state, and there's nothing wrong with childlike state.
So, if you don't mind me asking, when did you first notice this was happening to your mother?
On her 80th birthday, we had a big family reunion, and in retrospect, it was then. You could see it then.
Right.
And then it progressed pretty significantly since then.
So the reason for doing this is, this is literally 50 years since you discovered the AT, isn't it?
That's correct. 50 years. So I didn't plan it like that. That just.
Oh, really? I thought that turned out. I thought that was kind of again serendipity of the trial, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. It was just that's the way it worked out.
Yeah. So I know you're trying to raise money, and on what basis are you trying to raise money? How are you doing it?
I am asking people to give the Alzheimer's.org a penny a mile. So anybody that wants to commit, it's $21.90. I think most people could find that in the back of the couch. Mm-hmm. And I'm not dealing with it at all. It's on my Facebook page. There's a link straight to alz.org, and you can there's a donate area there. So.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put a link obviously on the show notes. But just before we go, I just want to turn back to the trail. You've obviously you sound like you've had a great time already. You've really enjoyed yourself on the trail. Have there been any difficult moments for you that you haven't enjoyed, and perhaps you might have done it differently?
I'm an optimist. I've enjoyed every second of it, except the decline to climb down off of Dragon's Tooth in the cold driving rain.
Man, that's tough in the dry.
That is dangerous. I was scared to death, more for my daughter than for me. But it was that was crazy.
Yeah,
just bad. We just had a bad confluence of issues, and it just turned out to be. We made it okay, but it was nasty.
And the last couple of miles before you get to Dragon's Tooth itself, that seems to be an endless. Well, it's not a sharp incline, but it seems to be endless, doesn't it, to get there?
Yes. And it was the wind was blowing. It was cold. It's a 700-mile mark, so I thought that would be an iconic thing. I just told my daughter, just take the darn picture. Let's move on. It's too cold.
and I think I seem to remember this happened a few times. It's a bit like not false summits, but it is a little bit like a false summit, because you think, oh, that's it. I'm there. I'm done now. I'm over with the difficulty for the day. But then the difficulty is about to start, isn't it? When you start climbing down. Right. You start climbing down, and you had wind and rain that time, did you?
That's right. Slippery. It was very treacherous. That's about the only time I was really, really uncomfortable. The rest of the trail is just in and out. For 2 seconds you feel uncomfortable, but this has just been a tremendous journey.
Yeah. And
I hope it continues another 1,500 miles.
So do I. In fact, come back and let me know when you've done. Let me know. It'd be great to hear from you. And one last thing I want to tell you, I CraftE and I started talking about this, and he's not going to tell you his trail name, but not tell you why. But all I'm going to say is the E at the end is a very Canadian thing, isn't it? It's craft, capital E. So what's the E at the end stand for?
A.
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 I didn't know that till I moved to America. That's what Canadians say at the end.
Yep, that's right. I kind of lost it because I lived in Florida for so long. Yeah, that's a classic.
Hey, exactly. Okay, buddy. Well, look, lovely talking to you. I really appreciate you chatting with us, and especially when you're halfway up a mountain, I presume. Where actually are you now then?
I'm right on the ridge, just, I don't know, in the middle of nowhere. It's about 2 miles south of the Cove Mountain Shelter. Just
Isn't that awesome?
Gorgeous, beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky.
I tell you what, man, can you take us, are you with anybody nearby?
No, there hasn't been anybody by in quite some time.
Well, the next person you see, get them to take a photo and text it over to me so we can have an appropriate photograph of you soon after you've spoken to us on the trail.
I sure as heck will.
Okay, buddy. Well, great talking to you. And
hey, just before you go, Mighty Blue, I just got to say, I appreciate, you're one of the motivating factors that got me out here. I listened to all your podcasts.
Oh, cool.
Your Mighty Blue and RTK, and RTK and I talked about maybe we could summit together. We're pretty well on the same pace, so who knows?
You could be on that show as well.
Maybe. I don't particularly care about that, but I just think RTK is a good man, and it'd be a pretty fun thing to do.
That's great.
So,
all right.
Thank you very much.
No worries. I'll speak with you soon, and you take it easy, okay?
Okay. You bet.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. How about that? He was more than 600 miles into his hike and had to get off the trail to be sworn in as a citizen. Congrats on that, CraftE. By the way, I already meant what I said. If you ever get an opportunity to attend the swearing-in citizenship ceremony with a friend, I strongly urge you not to pass that up. It is a truly epic moment to witness. And it should make you feel so proud to be an American when so many people from so many disparate countries want to become citizens of this incredible melting pot of humanity. That moment will never leave you. Talking of the class of 2018, I wanted to give a shout out to my buddy, a friend of the show and a fat guy back in the woods, Jack Masters. Jack had to unfortunately end his hike this week after nearly 700 miles due to an injury which will require surgery. He feels really down now about it, but I hope that he soon realises what an extraordinary achievement that it is that he's hiked 700 miles on the AT. Jack, we're proud of you, my friend, and we wish you all the very best with your surgery. Now, if I hit it again. And the return of Stacey Bucklin or Stylez. Stacey reflects on a hike and one or two things that she may have changed were she to do this again. The best bit, though, is what she says at the end. It kind of sums up what the trail is all about. Here's Stylez. Right, back on the show, Stacey Bucklin or Stylez. Hi, Stylez, how are you?
I'm good, Mighty Blue. How are you doing today?
I'm very good, thank you. And as I just mentioned, that this is an old segment that I wanted to revive if I did it again. I'm asking through hikers a question that, were they ever to be crazy enough to do a second long distance hike, what would they do differently? So how do you think your hike could have been improved? And are there things you might have done slightly differently?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's a couple of things I would do differently. Overall, I was really happy with things went, and I think it's because I kind of I let things go with the flow, and I didn't do too much planning. But one thing, and you've teased me about this before, but one thing that I think I would change is I made a commitment to blog every day before I started. And, when you're not in town, it gets hard to get caught up when you get behind. So It was getting to the point where I'd go into town and I'd spend 4 hours in the library at a computer trying to blog. And I just decided this is not how I want to spend my time. It was stressing me out. I felt guilt because I knew I had people that were reading my blog and I couldn't keep up. And it got to the point where I just stopped blogging altogether. So I think if I do another through hike, I'll do what I've seen some other people do, where I just kind of blog about the more interesting things and not try to blog about every single day, because that just became really overwhelming for me.
Yeah, well, we did it 4 years ago. Yeah, 4 years. Can you believe it's 4 years ago? We did this 4 years ago. Exactly. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it, really? And because it was 4 years ago, technology has really moved on since we did it. So it's much more accessible and easier to do now, isn't it?
I would say so. And I did have an app on my phone when I was hiking, but there gets to be a point where you want to talk to your other hikers. You just go to sleep at the end of the day rather than messing with your phone to try to type up a blog. But I think it's really important, at least for me, to document my journey. So I still want to do that in some way if I do another hike. I just don't think I'm going to do it every single day.
Can you remember it, though? Did you take sufficient notes in any way to be able to remember your hike and on this day you did this? Or is this now getting to be a fading memory for you?
Well, that's a good point. So I still kept a journal even though I wasn't blogging every day. But I do find that I'm starting to forget things. So I'll go back and read my blog or read my journal and remember funny things that people said or cool parts of the trail. But it has only been 4 years, but I am starting to forget it a little bit, sadly.
You would wait till you get to 60, girl. It gets a whole lot easier to forget then. Oh, so if I had written everything down, I wouldn't remember a bloody thing. But the great thing about it is that when you do read it, I find anyway, when I read my notes, I can put myself in that position and in that situation. And I think it was you actually posted a picture of me and my chair attachment. I don't know if you remember.
I do remember your chair.
That's right, yeah. I think you said Mighty Blue at his finest. And I can remember you taking that picture. And of course, I'd kind of forgotten it. But when you see the picture, you kind of remember. So were you happy with most of the gear you took? Because you said you didn't prepare that well. Was there much of your gear you would have changed?
I prepared a lot gear-wise, but not what I was going to do day to day. And really there's two things I think I might change about my gear. I hiked with an MSR hubba, which is basically a coffin. It's a small one-person tent. And I'm pretty small, so it worked okay for me. But I've since got a Z-Pax duplex, an ultralight 2-person tent, and I use that now when I go backpacking. It's just so nice to be able to put your pack next to you rather than under your feet or in your vestibule. It gets really crowded at the end of the day when you're in such a small tent, especially if it's raining.
Everybody loves the Z-Packs, don't they? It's super light, isn't it?
Yeah. It's amazingly light. I really like that. And I think one other thing that I would change, I was trying to avoid the stink factor by buying all wool clothes and wool underwear. And on the Appalachian Trail, especially in the summer, and well, you stink anyway, and it just didn't dry overnight. It was so humid on the trail that I'd wake up in the morning and have to put on like a wet bra and wet underwear and wet clothes, and that just was gross. So I ended up buying synthetic clothes while I was hiking, and that helped.
It makes a lot of difference. Well, it didn't help the stink factor for me at all, but it makes it makes it easier to dry at the very least, doesn't it?
Yeah, you're going to stink either way. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you get used to that, don't you? It becomes part of it. And when you're in company with other hikers, they don't say anything and you don't say anything because you all think you smell fine, don't you? It's only when you go back into a town or something like that you realise that your people are avoiding you or winding the windows down when you hit your lift.
Yeah, it's funny. We could always smell day hikers coming. We could smell their soap and their perfume, but it never really occurred to me that they could probably smell us coming too.
Was the hike tougher than you'd imagine it was going to be, or were you sufficiently read up to know that it was going to be quite onerous?
I think at the very beginning in Georgia, it was a little bit easier than I thought it was going to be.
Wow.
And then, but of course it wasn't easy. And then as I got up into the White Mountains,
do you remember those
it definitely got harder than I expected
really needed
it to be.
treat
And Katahdin, I thought was surprisingly difficult.
Days when you fall in the mud or the rain starts running down your neck, the rocks are driving you crazy, or even when you're just fed up.
So I guess
you need a boost.
Overall, it met my
when that happens, stop hiking. Take off your pack and treat yourself to one of Trailtopia's scrumptious desserts. Why not go for a Rocky Road pudding, a rich chocolate pudding loaded with mini marshmallows and toasted slivered almonds. By the time you get that into your system, you're going to be warm, toasty, and satisfied. Try Trailtopia Adventure Food, the best of home cooking away from home. I seem to remember you started the day with another hiker, didn't you, on day one? And she quit on you, which wasn't great. It wasn't a great idea.
Yeah.
Did you ever? You never considered quitting at that moment as well, did you? Because she wasn't coming.
No, I actually started with two other hikers. One was Twist, and one was a girl that never got a trail name because she quit. She quit on the approach trail. We didn't make it to the Appalachian Trail. No, I had been wanting to hike for probably 2 or 3 years by the time I went out there. And so I've been doing so much prep and getting myself so excited that even when I had hard days, I still really wanted to be out there. And I set small goals for myself too, which I think helped. And I was reading through my journal. I'd forgotten that I'd done this, but at the end of every day, I wrote what I was most excited about for the next day and the best thing that happened that day. So every day I was trying to find the positive in everything and keep myself going day to day.
Some days that was tough though, wasn't it? when you had terrible days. The best thing I did was to get in the camp and get in the bed. That could be it.
Yeah, but hey, I mean, at least you made it to the end of the day, right? You didn't have to get off trail.
Yeah. So if there was just one piece of advice that the post-hike Stylez could have given Stacey on day one, what piece of advice, of all the things you learned on the trail, what would that one piece of advice be?
Yeah.
I'll wait. Don't worry.
Told me this. Somebody told me this on the trail, and I wish I could remember who it was. But they said to me, it's a race to Katahdin, and the last one wins. And cool. That just really stood out to me because so many people try to push and do huge miles and try to get done with the trail quickly for one reason or another. But it's such a unique once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that it took me 6 months and 2 days. And one of the reasons it took me that long was that we started slowing down a lot at the end because we just didn't want it to end. You know, I wanted to be with my fellow hikers and out on the trail and in that culture for as long as I could. So I didn't really see any rush of trying to get to the end, especially as I got closer to the end. So I think that would be my one piece of advice is don't worry so much about just making it to Katahdin. Just enjoy the journey, enjoy being out there while you're there because it certainly won't last forever.
So that's interesting because I met a couple of guys who were much faster than me and I could not believe it when I caught them up. They'd said they deliberately slowed down. They were taking 0 days. They were they were camping on the trail itself, not on the path, but just stopping, not at a shelter. If they saw a place they liked, they'd fish there for half a day or something like that, And they were deliberately slowing down because they didn't want it to be over. For a lot of us, well, certainly for me anyway, I don't know a number of people I've spoken to, while it was always the journey, towards the end it became the destination. I was exhausted with about 500 miles to go, so it was never the destination for you. It was always the journey, was it?
Well, not all the time, but most of the time it was about the journey. And we started taking more and more zeros as we got closer and closer to Katahdin. But once I got to the 100-mile wilderness, I was ready to be done. I just wanted to finish the hike and move on to the next day and give my body a rest. But, I think if you're going to take the time in your life to go out there, you might as well make the most of it.
Absolutely. That's really good advice, that. So say that again. It's a race. It's not a race. The last one. It's a race to Katahdin, but the last one wins.
And the last one wins. Yep.
That's good. I like it. Would you ever do it again, or maybe another long distance trail?
It's funny you asked that. So last weekend I was out in Asheville, North Carolina, with my sister, and we drove out to Max Patch and did some trail magic. Yeah. And I started thinking, maybe I'll do this again one day. But my eyes right now are set on the PCT, so I'm hoping I can do that within the next 2 years. We'll see. I have a lot I have to figure out, but I really want to do another long distance trail.
I'm envious straight away. I don't think I've got another long distance one in me. Well, I'm trying to do the Camino this year, which is in October, which will be about 6 weeks, and that's probably enough for a 65-year-old bloke. So I think that could be it. But if you do go on PCT and you make a decision, let me know, and we'll talk again and talk about that once you get on that.
That sounds great. Yeah, I'm really hoping I can make it work.
Okay, Stars. Well, lovely to talk to you again, and stay well, and hopefully we will speak to you soon when you're on the PCT.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Take it easy. Bye. It's a race to Katahdin, and the last one wins. That little sentence encapsulates so much of the joy and the anguish of coming to the end of your hike. Yeah, I was ready for it to be over, but like Stacey, I wanted to be back there for the longest time. I'm not even sure it's left me yet. Speaking to Stacey, a fellow member of the class of 2014 brought my hike back to me so vividly, especially as she was an early part of my journey. Now, for those of you who may be interested, I've added a pink Hiking Radio Network logo to my merch store. If you like a t-shirt or a mug, then match it with the pink logo and you'll be good to go. I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes. Next week, we have Spencer and Blake. Spencer is a bloke who's wanted to do the AT for several years. Blake is his 14-year-old stepson. 14! You probably won't be surprised that Blake and Spencer are having a blast out there. Good for them. I look forward to sharing this story with you next week. Now, I mentioned last week that I will soon be reading a book about the Camino in Spain. It's called The Year We Seized the Day by Elizabeth Best and Colin Bowles. Now, Colin now writes under the name of Colin Faulkner. I told you that the two of them write their own parts for each chapter, and I was a little bit worried about who's going to read the female character, especially the way I mangle accents. I've now solved that problem by enlisting my lovely niece Laura to play Elizabeth's part. Happy days, and thanks, Laura. This week, we have 2 chapters from Hiking the Appalachian Trail is Easy, mainly because the first one, about water on the trail, only lasts for about 5 minutes. The other chapter, chapter 6, is about the myriad types of accommodation on and around the trail. I'll see you next week. Chapter 5, Water. Access to water is a world issue, with potential future ramifications too catastrophic to contemplate. On the AT, it's critical on a much smaller scale. That said, making sure that I had enough water for my immediate needs and for the day ahead was one of the more critical calculations I had to make on the trail. Each night, maps and guides were studied to locate the following day's camp and any potential eating spots. Of equal importance was the need to make sure one could reach those targets by regular accessibility to water. I ran out several times with no hope of replenishment for 4 or 5 miles ahead. This turned out to be debilitating in the truest sense of the word, lowering my strength and heightening my anxiety. I would start to panic that I wouldn't find a water source before the end of the day and that I'd have to spend the night without water. Such an unhappy circumstance rarely happened, however, because I paid as much heed to the water symbols in my guide as I did the shelters and tent sites. Not having access to water is one thing. not having enough water, however much I was able to drink, was another part of the same problem. I remember one particular day when water was liberally available. I would stop and fill up at every opportunity. I didn't notice it at first, but I soon started to tally up the number of litres I had collected and drunk. I was sweating profusely all day long, so drinking a lot of water was easy to do. That night, at a shelter, I noted that I had taken in 9 litres during the day, and that I hadn't needed to pee at all. I'd gone through the whole night and most of the next day before I was able to meet nature's call. Probably because of this example, above others, I can only reiterate that you should never underestimate how much water you're going to need. If you think you have too much, don't worry, you'll drink it. The problem with carrying too much water is that it weighs so darn much. A litre of water weighs 2.2 pounds. To give you some context, this was almost exactly the weight of my tent, including the strut and the metal pegs. I carried a Nalgene bottle that contained a litre, and this was constantly accessible at my hip. In addition to this, I often had a bladder with another 2 litres of water stored in my pack. The bladder came with a tube that I could reach without needing to divest myself of my pack to drink. In the early miles, 3 litres was my standard amount of water to carry. Eventually, I planned a little better and was able to drop it to 2, sometimes just the 1 litre in my Nalgene. Around New Jersey, I ran into a guy who told me a blindingly obvious trick to manage my consumption. He said that he had been hiking for years and that he had never carried more than a single litre of water. He didn't even own a bladder. When I looked at him rather dubiously, he said that it was all a matter of making sure that he took on sufficient water each day while carrying the least amount possible. Every time he came to a water source, he would stop, take off his pack, and have a short break. He would filter water into his bottle, drink it all over the next few minutes, then filter and fill it again. Sometimes he would really take his time and down 2 litres. In this way, he could limit himself to carrying no more than a litre, while drinking more than most of us during the day. I wish I'd met him earlier. I'd also bet my mortgage that Bear would already have known that. I enjoy drinking water. When my wife and I moved into our new home in 2012, we treated ourselves to a top-of-the-line water system. The system basically turned Florida's dreadful drinking water into something that was thirst-quenching and delicious. If you have had a drink of Florida's regular tap water, you will know what I mean. The taste of freshly drawn water from a stream was one of the enduring pleasures of the trail. I was a little dubious at first, with constant stories on the subject of norovirus ringing in my ears in the early days. I was aware that it was necessary to filter my water, even though a few people I met were content to drink directly from streams with no thought of filtration. In virtually every case, I'm sure that this would have been okay. However, I was eager to avoid taking too many days off the trail, so I made it a habit to filter every time. I started out using an MVR filter, which proved to be very slow. Unless I cleaned the device regularly, I could take up to half an hour getting a litre of drinkable water. At one point in my journey, it was necessary for me to return home for 8 or 9 days. My brief sojourn afforded me the opportunity to rethink my pack, and I made a few changes. I decided to ditch my MVR and go with the system that roughly 70% of hikers were using. A Sawyer squeeze is a simple device that works quickly and efficiently in filtering water. The squeeze comes with 3 different sized bags for retrieval from streams and ponds. I chose to get rid of these bags very quickly, adopting the best practice that I saw on the trail. Most hikers would buy a smart bottle of water, drink its contents, and then use the bottle to retrieve from sources going forward. The bottle attached to the filtration unit, and I could either drink directly from the unit or squeeze water into my Nalgene. I used the same smart bottle for 1,400 miles. There were some unpleasant ponds from which I drew water. Often there were swarms of mosquitoes hovering above, and presumably crapping in a tiny water source. Ultimately, I had to make the choice to take water at that stage or hope to find another source quickly. I rarely passed an opportunity to fill up if I had less than half a litre in my Nalgene. I strongly advise you to do the same and feel confident that Bear will be nodding his head right now. Chapter 6. Accommodation. When you sign up to hike the Appalachian Trail, you accept the general principle that you will be spending the majority of your nights in either a tent or at a shelter. I'm not exactly sure that I was aware just how feral life can become in these shelters, but I was in for a shock that I soon overcame. Life as a hobo can be strangely compelling. Shelters are provided at regular intervals, with more than 250 located along the trail. This spacing is supposed to allow even the least ambitious hiker to get safely under cover should they so wish at the end of the day. The structures range from 5 to 15 miles apart, though that can be increased when the trail passes through an intervening town with lodging. In New Hampshire there is a system of pay-to-stay huts, mainly for day and weekend hikers, so tenting became my normal routine in that state. There was sometimes the possibility of work for stay. This basically entailed performing menial tasks given to me by a spotty kid with a bit of a power complex. The variant, work for food, was similarly demeaning, and the food was normally discarded oatmeal. Please believe me when I tell you this, oatmeal that didn't make the cut for breakfast as a reward is spectacularly disappointing. Each shelter had a logbook in which hikers would record their progress and often their witty comments. Reading these comments was a great way to while away 20 minutes. I'd leaf through the unhygienic journal, toxic may be a better word, to catch up on friends who were now ahead of me. The logbook served the additional purpose of locating individuals who went missing. If they had made an entry at a shelter, then searchers would at least have a point of origin for their investigation. A lot of people really went to town with their entries. Indeed, one Taiwanese-American man wrote out a short essay at every shelter he passed. Somewhat disappointingly for readers, it was precisely the same essay each time. He was proud of his heritage and delighted at his American assimilation. He was aiming to be the first such person to complete the through hike. Oh yes, he also used a golf club as a trekking pole. I seem to remember that it was a 5-iron. I often felt that shelters were a little too communal for my liking. As I've gotten older, scrunching up with a bunch of 20-somethings has fallen down my list of fun activities that I'd like to do. I can only assume that I'm more worried about my effect on them than I am about their effect on me. Whatever my motivation was, I soon discovered that tenting was going to be my preferred option. Sometimes, however, the rain was too hard or the wind was too intense, so I had to go with the flow. Everybody seemed to be perfectly content to shift up and make room. Shelters for, say, 8 souls would often house 15 sweating, snoring, farting and belching bodies. Many of my fellow hikers loved this communal feeling. I felt that such enjoyment reduced in direct correlation to the increase in age of each hiker. At 61, I was happy to go with the alternative if one existed. Having had no experience of tenting in my life, it came as a pleasant surprise and a massive relief to find warmth and security within the confines of my little home away from home. There appeared to be no logic to this. My tent was made of the thinnest, lightest material possible, yet I never felt threatened by encroachment from outside. Even the bug net, once closed, enabled me to feel comfortable that snakes and insects would be kept at bay. It also seems highly likely that, were any bears to be sniffing around for food in the night, my face could have been no more than an inch from theirs. As I say, the logic of this blanket of apparent security entirely escapes me, but I found many fellow travellers felt just as secure as I did. For those of you who have concerns in this direction, I can assure you that it will be one of your biggest and most pleasant surprises on the trail. Finding a level spot in which to pitch my tent was another issue that confounded my best efforts with alarming regularity. Once more, knowing nothing was the perfect way to learn. It is only when you wake in a heap in one corner of the tent that you realise that you may not have quite established the optimum position the previous evening. I never managed to hit it exactly right, despite making progress toward the end of my hike. After 2,200 miles, you would have thought I would have improved somewhat faster. Tent life was surprisingly cosy. While I always found it to be a bit of a mission setting up, the payoff rarely disappointed me. Once I was inside, I soon found that sleep came easily. A nightly routine in the tent soon emerged, in much the way it does at home. Having been a little haphazard in my initial distribution of nighttime items in the tent, I first had to put everything in its place. My camp shoes went right by the entrance, along with my jacket, in the likely event that I'd need to leave during the night for a call of nature. For this same purpose, I shoved my headlamp inside my shoes. My boots were left to fend for themselves just outside the tent on the other side of the bug net. My food items, not the food itself, were also kept in the tent, by my head to my left, allowing me easy access for breakfast. They were washed well to avoid food smells that might attract plundering bears. Right by my stove, my plate and my spork, I kept my Nalgene bottle for a middle-of-the-night drink. My iPad and glasses were to the right of my head in case I couldn't sleep. My pack skulked at the bottom of the tent, having been raided for various items, though it was still in the way. The various straps were opened to gain easy night access to clothes in dropping temperatures, but I tried to keep the majority of my belongings tucked away to assist my early morning manoeuvres. Too much stuff strewn around complicated the packing up process. When I referred earlier to my food items, I differentiated between implements and food. It became a nightly tradition to remove my food bags — my wife was a serial over-caterer — and hoist them high above the ground. In some of the earlier states, pulley systems were provided at shelters, so hanging our food often became a team effort after communal dinners. On those occasions that I camped elsewhere, or where pulleys weren't available, I had to practice my laughably underdeveloped cowboy skills. This entailed grabbing a nearby stone and attaching it to the nylon rope I had with me for this very purpose. The stone needed to strike the balance of being heavy enough to bring the rope back to earth once it was successfully launched over a branch, yet light enough to both handle and project upwards. Sometimes the search for the stone took longer than the throw itself. I was normally tolerably good at this exercise. Mind you, on a few occasions I took at least 20 minutes to get my food swinging gaily above me. As you'd imagine, lobbing a junior rock 20 feet in the air about 50 times after a 20-mile day was never my idea of fun. One of the clear drawbacks of sleeping in my tent was the obvious need to disassemble and repack the tent the following morning. I was utterly hopeless at this. Many hikers I met were all action from the time they woke until they were on the road. I fell into the camp of the low achievers in this regard. No matter what I did, I couldn't get on the road for about 2 hours after I woke. I'd be determined to get out earlier, but the time seemed to disappear. Only when I became part of a team did my abilities in this regard improve. Even then, the improvement was marginal at best. Despite these reservations, camping in a tent was one of my big surprises on the AT. I had concerns over whether or not I'd be able to sleep at all, yet I think I had underestimated the soporific powers of a 15-mile walk. When you're tired, you're going to sleep. Even Bear can't ignore the call from the land of Nod. I stayed in several hostels during my trip, and these varied greatly in comfort along the way. Some of my earlier misgivings with regard to co-ed sleeping were soon put aside, for the very first stop I took was at Such's while still in Georgia. The hostel at the general store was the only available accommodation, so I had to make the best of the situation. Once I realised I'd be spending the night with a bunch of youngsters and a couple of dogs, I quickly established myself in the corner of the room. There was a dilapidated group of bunk beds, and given my tendency to use the facilities in the middle of the night, I wanted a spot on a lower bunk with a direct line to the bathroom door. We were all still getting to know one another at that stage, and I noticed how helpful everybody was, from the youngest to the oldest. It was as if we all recognised each other's vulnerabilities and were making an extra effort to make each individual feel at ease. While I didn't know it at the time, that feeling would never really lapse during my time on the trail. Part of my reticence in staying in hostels was the same issue that made me prefer sleeping in a tent as opposed to a shelter. My snoring wasn't something I could personally attest to, yet I'd been assured for much of my life that it was fairly startling. This was especially so when I was very tired and deeply asleep. I knew that walking substantial distances every day would take care of those qualifications, so I was concerned about exposing my friends to this potential sideshow. In general terms, however, a hostel is really a shot in the dark. Your choice might be okay, or it might be horrendous. You really won't know for sure unless you try it out. Expectations in this regard need to be managed. However, after a few days on the trail, you'll soon see your standards take a nosedive, so be prepared to put up with conditions that you would never contemplate in real life. Relax, it's fun. Going into town would normally offer hikers the ability to eat relentlessly and sleep in a proper bed. Some couldn't afford to do this, but I took the opportunity as often as possible, if only to catch up with my festering laundry. Many of the motels provided this service, and I was able to chuck everything in one load. No sorting lights, darks and whites for me, then lie on my bed watching TV while I waited for the cycle to finish. My clothing assumed a pallid shade of grey towards the end of my trip. I believed that it matched the one on my face. While I would never plan a vacation around some of the places in which I stayed, I have to say that they provided me with a respite from some of the most arduous aspects of trail life. Motels were rarely attractive, and several had only a passing acquaintance with cleaning techniques. That said, they brought home to me the importance of getting off the trail on occasion. These overnight breaks renewed my enthusiasm to get back onto the trail. In this, they were invaluable. You don't take on the Appalachian Trail to experience the coziness of home living. If that is what you want, you should stay at home. The trail provides hikers with the locations at which to stay or pitch their tents. The small towns close to but off the trail allow relief from these spots. The balance of relative comfort, real camping, and the sounds of the night are all totally down to each hiker's preference. Every option is waiting for you. For that, you will always be grateful.